We can always edit it.
We can always edit it. Awesome. Welcome to the clearing. Someone I've been really excited to speak to. Katie Elliott Armitage, who runs a place called swopped.com, which I have to say is one of my absolute happiest places on the planet. Not least because Katie's there, who I think of being a sort of Judy Dench lookalike. Woohoo! And also you run this place, which is the most beautiful place to curate workshops. It's surrounded on three sides by sunflowers, and I have the great joy and gift of going there once a year to do something called the Instant Wit Laughter Lab, which is Le Space, which is your drama studio, which is one of, I have to say, if I think about where a clearing is for me, which we're going to come on to, it is absolutely the room in which we run the workshops where you are. So, Katie Elliott Armitage, welcome to the Good Listening To podcast and welcome to the clearing.
Thank you very much. I'm very flattered that you've invited me, actually.
In fact, when I got going with the podcast, actually, you need to know this, you're one of the first people I thought, oh, I must speak to Katie Elliott.
Oh, I like your story.
I honestly, when we watch all episodes, you'll see I don't say that to all my guests.
Okay.
It is a very
I'll take
special
your word
place.
for it.
So it says, I Googled you before I started, and you're in a website, one of the first links for you is called The Fabric of Life, which is quite appropriate for you because of your love and joy of textiles and all things that got you going with workshopping. But you swapped London life for rural Dordogne. And there you find yourself now at this wonderful place, as I keep saying, called lessuranglais.com. The commoner in me, it's lessursanglaise.com if you don't speak French. How are you today in the Dordogne?
Yeah, we've got a beautiful day. Actually, the clouds are just coming over and there's tremendous wind, but it's beautiful. And very warm today, very warm.
And in England, it's absolutely womping it down, and I'm in Bristol, obviously, so
yeah.
At least you're all right in the Dordogne, shall we say. So yes, let's get you on the open road of talking about bringing you into a clearing first of all, Katie. So there's some lovely storytelling metaphors and archetypes to enjoy as we let your thinking unfold in answer to the following questions. It's sort of my own version of Desert Island Discs, if you will. So where does Katie Elliott Armitage go in order to get clutter-free? What is your clearing like for you?
Well, I think there are several, actually. I don't think there's one particular place. But if I want to get away from it, I can physically remove myself by coming up here to my studio. And it's just got everything I want to get on with work that I want to do. So apart from a proper computer up here.
We have had some wonderful comedy in trying to get your iPad to be the right height. We've had all sorts of comedy where you've been in all sorts of iterations.
We have indeed. Next time I'm bringing not that there will be a next time, but next time I'm bringing the wretched thing up here.
I hope there will be next time, because I'm supposed to be coming to France to do the next workshop. You haven't fired me already, I hope. But I'm coming to do the next Instant Wit Laughter Lab workshop next May. Hurrah.
That's true, and we're really looking forward to it.
And upstairs, as I know, is your den of being a seamstress, if you like. I know you're not just a seamstress, you're many things, but you have a love of fabric, don't you?
I absolutely love textiles. I've actually had a moratorium this year. My New Year's resolution was I'm not to buy any yarn and I'm not to buy any fabric because it's just ridiculous. I've just got so much and I'll never get through it. So
and and in terms of your journey to now and for your passion for all things textiles, fabric, how did that all begin for you? Oh
gosh. Oh, really? From a very, very early age. My mother was a very, very good seamstress and very liberated. I mean, she had piles of fabric and yarns and things. And I can't remember who taught me. I vaguely remember a knitting class, but not really. And we were allowed to just experiment. We were allowed to use any of her fabrics and try anything. Some terrible, terrible disasters. So it started off with dressmaking, really, but we tried other things, embroidery, darning, all sorts of things, very sort of 50s and 60s.
And how many sisters do you have? I think I know the answer, but this is the podcast. So how many sisters do you have, Katie?
Well, I have 4 siblings. So I've got 3 sisters and a brother. Mm-hmm. And we're all quite close. So, well, when I say we're quite close, we are close, but we don't we're not constantly in each other's pockets, so we know we're there. So it's a very nice relationship.
And there's a joy of sisterhood even in lessuranglais.com, which is obviously the English sisters, which, you know, before I met you, I probably would have needed that translation, so I hope it's helpful to some. But the English sisters, in my experience of being at your workshops, you become private chefs to what's going on in the workshop space. And honestly, coming to France, just where you live, you know, in Vertiac, in the Dordogne, quite close to Bordeaux, but it is the most beautiful place that you found yourself in. And what's the story of how you got there? I know it's a converted walnut mill is where you've renovated, isn't it?
Yes, it was. We came over to look at something else, which turned out to be completely inappropriate. It had the TGV running through the garden, but we didn't pick that up till we got down here. And Mike, my husband, popped into the local agent and said, well, we're down here, have you got anything else? And my only proviso was, it has to have water, because I'd read Jean de Florette and the trilogy, so it had to have water, because I didn't want to be
it was Manon you've just reminded me of that trilogy. It's beautiful, wasn't it? Manon des Sources and Jean de Florette. Yeah, lovely.
So he went off and they said, well, no, we haven't got anything. And then as he was leaving, they said, well, we've got this one place, but nobody's lived there for, it must have been 40 or 50 years at that point. Don't go inside. It's in terrible condition. So it was the one and only property that we saw, and we just completely fell in love with it.
Oh, how
and we're way too spontaneous and way too... we never think long and hard enough about things, and we just said yes,
By the way, where I'm from, in terms of my comedy improvisational love, there's no such thing as way too spontaneous. So where you are now is absolutely the elixir of life. It's so beautiful that although it might have come with a pain of renovation, you've got a place to. I'd love to retire there myself someday. It's that gorgeous.
Well, it worked out, but it could easily have swung the other way.
Yes.
But we were just lucky, I guess.
But and people, I'll ask about the website. You'll be able to talk about where people can find the website for Les Sœurs Anglais at the end. So we'll definitely do that. So yes, I was getting you talking about your sisters, and indeed the fact that Susie, who also comes to join in the workshops, is certainly one of your family members that I know very, very well.
Yeah, well, she was really almost from the very beginning. She and I had originally we were doing French linens when I was still in the UK. I was coming over to France, going to Brocantes, buying old linens and then selling them in the UK. It wasn't very successful because nobody wants to iron sheets and you have to iron linen. Yes. So anyway, that was fine. That was on a sort of decline. And then we moved to France. Mike and I moved to France. And anyway, the whole idea of workshops materialized, and Susa got involved again with that.
And you started off with sort of fabric related or textile related workshops, and then they've evolved in a wonderful way where you've just been curating an expansion of the type of wonderful workshops you have there.
You've got a very good memory, Chris. You should be doing interviews. Oh, you are. Yeah, we had. We started off with textiles because that's what I knew about. That's who I was networked with and connected with.
Yeah.
And we had some wonderful people come in and give workshops. But it was, at that point, it was just in the main house, in the Maison de Maître, and it was in the attic, and it was all a bit it was too exciting with too much going on.
Yeah.
And we realized that people wanted to relax and get into their arts and crafts. So yeah, well, that's another whole story, but and then Susu was involved. Sue, my sister, was involved in that, and my other sister Lizzie, who was in PR, did a lot of work for us at the beginning. She's retired now, so she's not involved really. And it kind of worked, we weren't on top of each other, and we were all kind of separated, physically separated, but we could work together, and then when we had the workshops, we would get together and
And there's a separate, your converted barn is now the most beautiful l'espace, you call it, don't you? And why I so love it, there's also a ping pong table almost in its own annex where you are. So you had me at ping pong table even before
a
we did the
new ping pong table, Chris. I'm sure the
Oh.
first time you came, it was the old one, which was all chipped. But when
yes.
we realised you were so keen,
I am.
we went out and got a new one.
Yes, and in fact, I first found your beautiful place because we found it as a holiday destination, and very specially, we were there for my daughter Lily's GCSE results, and we got them on the the deck of L'Espace. So
I remember.
I'm sort of more and more connected to the place, particularly now because as soon as I realised you started doing workshops and you're evolving, I remember very strongly saying, "Oh, I wonder if I could try and talk you into letting me have a comedy improv workshop here." And because of your joy of yes, and you said yes, and then I left you alone, and then you chased me, said, "Are you going to make it work then?" And I'm thinking, yes, she wants to do it. So
I do remember the meal. Actually, I remember we were all sitting outside,
yes,
and talking to you about it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so it started out being textiles, then it was food related, because I always describe the place as being it used to be food or fabric related, and then now it's comedy and music and dance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, 12 years of textiles. We wanted to move on and do something different. So yes, we luckily we met you, and then we know musicians, and that's a different road to go down. But yeah, so here we are.
Yes.
12 years later, 14 years later, or whatever it is. Yeah.
And in fact, my own. So let's get you on to your clearing is then upstairs there where you have everything you need, and of course where you live as well. So I'm going to join you in your clearing with a tree, which is a bit weird because we've talked about you've got quite a small space there. But I'm going to come into your clearing with a tree. We're going to shake your tree to see which apples fall out. And Katie, the apples are the next storytelling series of metaphors where you've had 5 minutes or as long as you needed before we spoke to think about 4 things that have shaped you, Katie Elliott, 3 things that inspire you, 2 things that never fail to grab your attention, and then 1 quirky or unusual fact about you we couldn't possibly know until you tell us. So it's over to you on the open road of which of those apples you might like to talk about.
Well, I think I've kind of talked about things that have shaped me, which is my extended family. I've got a very large family because obviously my siblings have had families, and I'm definitely have been affected by my own children and my husband, and yeah, I think that's had the most effect on my life is the people that are close to you. But that's not unusual. It's just that I think I've been impressed by them. You know, the things that they do have inspired me, and their ethos really about life.
So you've grown together as you've grown together, really, as you've gone through the path of your life.
Yeah.
Lovely.
And my parents were incredibly important. Both very, very interesting people who had difficult lives, really, and came through and never complained, really. And
And I always associate you as having come from London originally, but where were you born?
I was born in Ghana, so we spent quite a lot of our childhood traveling around Africa, and then we ended up in America, but we went to Malaya as well. My father was he was both a consulting engineer and a civil engineer, and he was working for various governments. So we kind of went along. I went to school in Ethiopia.
Wow.
But only for a short while. Otherwise, we were generally sent back with my mother to the UK while my father stayed in these exotic places. And she had the burden of looking after all these children. And then he would come back periodically to touch base, I guess, really.
Yeah.
And eventually he retired. Well, he didn't retire. He had a business in London. Yeah. And they retired down to Devon. But it was a very interesting childhood, and funnily enough, it has left me not particularly wanting to travel. Whereas I've met a lot of people who've grown up abroad and all they want to do is go back or travel. I actually feel I've done that, been there.
Yes.
It doesn't inspire me at all.
So you found a really beautiful place to just be now as the place you want to be, which is like you've found your place.
It's like my nest, really.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
lovely. And I had a parallel, similar upbringing. I grew up in Uganda until I was 10. We were all together as a family, but we would come back every 2.5 years. And I remember we were close to in a place called Ginger in Uganda, near to somewhere called the Owen Falls Dam. And we met lots of civil and civic engineers who were there trying to do the sort of irrigation of the Nile. So I don't know what type of engineering your father did.
Well, he actually worked on the Volta Dam in Ghana, and in Ethiopia he was working on dams, but also roads and bridges. And in fact, there's a very sad story. He was in Singapore during the Second World War, and just before he'd been over there, and he was in the Public Works Department as an engineer, and he was designing and building bridges. And then when the Japs came down from Singapore, he had the enviable task of actually having to blow up his own bridges as they came down. And he said it was so soul destroying. Yeah.
And presumably, well, bridges that had taken possibly years in their concept, and then he was just
absolutely, yeah.
Wow.
So, but he wasn't a taciturn man, but he wasn't a man of many words, and it was really difficult to get him to talk about things like that.
Yes.
That whole Singapore experience was just
a shadow of the past. Yes. Of its time, yes, indeed. So in our tree, we're still thinking about things. Anything else you want to tell us about what's shaped you?
I was trying to think of teachers who shaped me, but I can't think of any that are really memorable. You know, I had a good convent education, good nuns, bad nuns, you know, like most people. And then art college. There was a guy called Mr. Lingford who taught us typography, and it was in the old school typography, so you had to learn to typeset, and it was a very hands-on experience. And he really shaped my sense of design, because he sort of simplified everything and made us work through it. It's like learning your tables when you're a youngster.
Yes.
If you learn them by rote, it never really leaves you. Mr. Lingford really left an impression. But, you know, I didn't kind of warm to him.
There's a lovely, if I may, sort of golden thread. I'm using that about fabric, but the idea of the tactile nature of how you learnt stuff, because obviously you can make your own clothes, you're very hands-on, and having learnt to design through typography, that's again hands-on, isn't it? So it's a way of learning, rather than the modern world, just get given something digital where no one can feel it quite as much.
Well, I was saying the other day, we didn't even have copiers. I mean, we couldn't copy anything.
Yeah.
It was that long ago. I'm that old. You know, you could photograph it, but there was no way of copying anything.
You're not that old, because the oldest bit of calligraphy I remember ever seeing was the Book of Kells, which is connected to Dublin University, which is when the monastic they'd use lapis lazuli and sometimes whole pages of the Book of Kells would take a monk in calligraphy their entire lifetime to do one page. And of course, nowadays you go, and your reason for doing that was, you know, it's an investment of art, but talk about, you know, commitment.
There's a very interesting program on at the moment, which you may have seen, called Secret History of Writing.
No.
Actually, I think it was in 3 parts. But yeah, they talk about the manuscripts there and how it would take a whole town a year to make 100 books or something. I mean, you know, just crazy. Yeah. Can't even. This is pre-printing, but you know, we take it all so for granted now, don't we? I mean,
we do. So we're in. I think we might have covered off the 4 things that have shaped you, and you've also strayed beautifully into things that have inspired you as well. So anything else you want to tell me about those series of apples before we get on to the next?
Well, definitely the things that inspire me, or does that mean? I would say it's music, music, and dancing. Absolutely, dancing. Those 2.
And another one of your beautifully successful weekends that I didn't manage to come to, but it's called the Blues and Boogie weekend, isn't it, that you do?
I just love it. Absolutely love it. It's like having your own house party with the most talented musicians there playing music that you adore. So it's just magic. Yeah.
And your
Yeah.
glorious studio does, by a really, really happy accident, have the most beautiful acoustic, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't planned at all, but we had a wonderful architect called Jeremy Harris who came in, and we used as much natural products as we can. And he put in this, I don't know, but insulation of some sort, reprocessed corn or something. I have no idea. And it's absolutely, everybody, all the musicians that have come say it's just the most wonderful acoustics in there. So it's just happy chance, really.
And you have had bands come and record albums there too, haven't you? I remember you talking about.
Yes, we did. We had
Steel Ice Band.
A guy called Peter Knight, who was from Steel Ice Band.
Yeah.
He reformed a group called Gig Spanner, and they joined together with somebody else called the Gig Spanner Big Band. Mm-hmm. And they came for a whole week, and they rehearsed and recorded, and yeah, it was wonderful. And then they gave a concert as a sort of thank you. So it was good.
And again, I have such happy memories of exactly where you're talking about, because you've got the most extraordinary deck there as well. And I remember our family were putting out yoga mats, and all a big family of 9 of us were there, and we all put yoga mats down and were stargazing, because the sky gets beautifully dark at night where you are too.
We have had yoga workshops there, actually. Yeah, it's good.
And what better place to do a salutation to the sun when you're surrounded on 3 sides by sunflowers, as you obviously often are.
Absolutely. Or a headstand. Take a completely different view of the world. Perfect for your instant wit laughter lab.
Thank you. Good plug there. Thank you very much. So 2 things that never fail to grab your attention. We're mixing them up beautifully here, so they're coming out. But what about 2 things that never fail to grab your attention?
Well, one of them would be music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And also I'm very fond of British artists during the sort of middle of the 20th century. Absolutely love their art. So people like Nevinson and Nash.
Did you say Neville? I misheard the word.
Nevinson and Nash and Wyndham Lewis and Gaudia Breshka and I just think their work is wonderful. And then you move into the 50s, and you've got wonderful designers, textile designers like Lucienne Day and her husband, who was an architect, Robin Day. Those sort of things I find inspirational. Yeah.
So art, so there's lots of texture in what you love, because there's art, there's calligraphy, there's print setting. There's something very, very sort of tactile to what you're describing, really grabs your attention as well.
Very visual, yeah. Which is odd because I think a piece of music that I love, and I'm a bit of a tart with music, I like classical, and I do love all sorts of, I like some pop songs, and I like folk, bits, not all of them, obviously. But yeah, you play a piece of music and I could listen to it over and over, that juvenile, adolescent thing of listening to a song over and over and over again. I can still do that.
What would be your favourite song from adolescence that you play over and over and over again?
Oh God, I love Creedence Clearwater Revival. Gosh. Oh, now you put me on the spot, Chris. I hadn't thought this one through.
Well, I can cover
the Beatles. You listen to the Beatles and you can't help but. I know we're conditioned. Well, I'm conditioned because it was my era, but you can't. You know all the words, and you know that everything about it, and it's just.
They were often thought to some to be the first ever real global phenomenon. The Beatles, I know.
Really, more than Elvis Presley, do you think?
Oh, you're quite right. You've got me on a technicality. Him. Oh, and by the way, I was going to cover for you. There's something that inspires me when I'm in your barn, which is the theatre space where I go for the clearing, and the drama teachers like to do it in circles. The glorious barn where the instant wit laughter lab happens. I nearly always find myself having to play, because you're surrounded on 3 sides by sunflowers, Fields of Gold, the Sting version.
Oh, yes.
And so I often have it.
That one too.
So Fields of Gold. If I hear Fields of Gold, it now makes me think of your beautiful barn, and it makes me sort of champ at the bit to go and get on with the next workshop. And of course, we've had to not do them this year because of circumstances beyond our control, have we not?
Yeah,
We'll be back
I
next.
think you should write to Sting and tell him.
I'll make a point of it. In fact, I'll see if he'll let me give him a damn good listening to through the Good Listening To podcast.
Your next one.
Lovely. So, what about a quirky or unusual fact about you, just before you get you out of shaking your tree in your lovely seamstress attic space there? Quirky or
What,
unusual fact?
taking my did you? What did I do? I've had many careers in my life, not careers, but jobs. And one of them, I designed a board game. I've designed a board game called Movie Mogul, which actually sold in lots of shops.
I like that. So who backed you or sponsored you? Was it a major game?
No, we didn't. We went to a lot of the fairs, and it got to the point where you either sold your idea, and apparently if you sell your idea, the companies just shelve them.
Yeah.
And they change it a bit, and then they don't have to pay you copyright. So
Right.
we were told not to go down that road. And then we were told we would have to invest literally hundreds of thousands of pounds into the game to produce it, to mass produce it.
Yes.
And
It's called Movie Mogul, did you say?
it's called Movie. Oh, I should have had one here to show you, shouldn't I? I
Well,
don't.
As we're on a podcast, we can lie. Say, oh, no, we're now looking at the board game of Movie Mogul.
I'll take a photo and email you.
I would like.
Yeah. So yes, and we had an opening night at the Soho Club with quite a few celebrities. Oh, it was great fun. It was enormous fun, in fact, but didn't go anywhere.
And not to age us all, but can you get what was the type of, when was the year when you produced your game?
Oh, late 80s, early 90s, I think. And it was just at the time when video games were coming in,
Yeah.
much more simple than the ones they can get now. But so there was just...
I like that. So it was a long time ago, and I remember video games when they first came out. I used to go to Southend Seafront to play. What was it called? Galaxian and Space Invaders.
That's Space Invaders. Yeah, my son's had Space Invaders. Yeah,
Of course he has.
Can't get them away from it when they're on Twitch.
We didn't know we were going to talk about that, but do you remember Galaxian? Of course you don't.
I don't. I never played a video game. Not once in my life have I played a video game. Not even. Oh, I have played Scrabble with my grandson, but.
Oh yes, I've got a joke about Scrabble, which was in the LOL virus group recently. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
Which is, Katie, I accidentally last night ate a load of Scrabble tiles. My next visit to the bathroom could spell disaster. Thank you very much, here all week. By the way, you have been very, very supportive since I was last with you in France, where I've been on the open road of this Facebook group called #LOLvirus to spread a little happiness and antivirus. And you've been very encouraging and participating beautifully in that, may I?
Well, it picks you up enormously, especially if you had a bad day and this wretched coronavirus going on and on and on. It just kind of gets your feet back onto the ground and
yes.
sort
And
things
by the
out.
way, the other delicious quote about that is, we have to laugh because laughter, as we already know, is the first evidence of freedom. Ooh. Get me.
Well, I was going to say, actually, when I was talking about my family, to sort of backpedal tremendously, and things that inspire me, I think it's qualities in people that inspire me rather than naming an individual. I think it's, generosity, the ability to laugh at yourself, kindness. It's those sort of things that you recognize in people and they become your good friends for life. And not many of them out there, but
yeah, they are a precious find indeed.
Absolutely.
Someone that can resonate and chime with your own values in that way.
Yeah.
And by the way,
go on.
say, as you've all, I hope you know that I keep saying, and I hope you're never embarrassed by this, but you did so remind me of Judy Dench when I first met you. So you're my sort of Judy Dench lookalike, which is partly why I thought, oh, she's very interesting. So, and also,
So thank you. Well, thank you, Judy. Thank you.
no, and you're attractive in your own right, obviously, but it was the idea of, what
You're digging yourself deeper.
Yes.
I love that quote. He thought he'd dug as deep as I'm very bad at quotes, but he thought he dug himself into a hole, and then he looked down and it was a lot further to dig.
So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll use a grappling hook and get out of there sharpish, because I don't want to get into a particular bear pit. That's all good. So we're now coming towards away from your clearing. Sorry, into the clearing again, where we're going to talk about now alchemy and gold, which is about when Katie Elliott is in purpose or in flow, doing what you most love to do in the world. What is it you most like to do? When are you at your happiest?
I don't think there's one thing, actually. I love to dance. Absolutely love to dance. Yeah, I guess that takes you onto a higher level. I mean, I don't do it very often anymore, but I met my husband Mike dancing, and for years and years and years, that was the place we would go to have fun. And it just takes you away from yourself.
It's the most beautiful escapism. Yes, just the wonder of dance. Beautiful. And is that just a particular, were you doing particular types or styles of dance?
I did ballet as a child.
Yeah.
And I really, really wish I'd kept it up. But we were never pressurized to do anything as children, Sounds like a complaint. I mean, how lucky were we? There wasn't any kind of pressure on us. But at about 14, I decided I didn't want to do that. I wanted to play the piano,
right,
which I was never very good at. I've taken it up again, which I'm quite happy about. But I was never very particularly good at the piano, but I decided I wanted to give that a try. But I stopped the ballet, and I'm really, really sorry about that. In fact, I got a place at the Royal School of Ballet.
Wow.
And my mother wouldn't let me go, because she said because we were all, we were already separated from my father, and she wanted to keep the family together. And I think I would have been hopelessly homesick anyway. So I think she made the right decision for me, but I wish I'd just kept dancing.
But it's so lovely that you've got an ongoing love of, that's where you go to almost get into a bliss state. Dancing is a source of great joy and happiness for you in terms of your alchemy and your gold. Lovely. And then finally, we're coming up to where I'm going to award you with a cake now. And thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Where the cake has a cherry on the cake, which is another metaphor that's open to interpretation. It's the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or it could be notes or advice to a younger version of yourself, or it could be an inspirational quote of choice. It's however you'd like to leave us with this conversation. So,
but like a Nike, go for it, or whatever it is. I just say. I say it to my son the whole time, and I try and say it to myself when I'm feeling low, but it's just get over it. Life is full of disappointments. It's full of people who don't do what you expect of them. Just get over it, move on. You could spend your whole life crying about stuff that happened years ago, and
that's a lovely sort of future-focused imperative. Just get over it and move forward. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a lot about when you do your classes. I did your class. I'm just going to plug for you now, Chris. I did your workshop here last year, and I absolutely loved it. It was one of the most fun things I've ever done. And it's one of the reasons I loved it is it's so positive. And I know a friend said to me a long time ago, you can look at things and you can think the worst is going to happen or the best is going to happen. You never know. So why don't you just assume it's the best? And I felt that the whole workshop was about that, looking at life positively. I thought it was brilliant.
You're very kind to say so. And it is, as we know, it's applying the currency and the beauty of the yes and mindset where anything is possible. And just adhere to unbounded optimism, but not in a really sort of woo-woo way where it's just about positive thinking. It's just having an optimistic yes and methodology and mindset towards life.
Yeah. And sometimes that's really, really difficult, but
and by the way, in terms of creating an atmosphere, what makes it extra special, when we come and do the workshops for you, it is because of the location, it's the atmosphere, it's the cooking that you do as well, which is so lovely. Honestly, I can salivate at the thought of being back at Les Sœurs Anglais next May to do, it'll be Instant Wit Laughter Lab 3, postponed from this year, but we're going to be back, with even more optimism once.
I certainly hope so. And you were planning something else as well, I think, but that's another story.
There'll hopefully be because of the linked to the yes and mindset. I'm hoping to do a coaches retreat there where we'll explore the art of asking the right type of questions. Because I think of your big space almost being like an extra large queue as a shape, like a typography space, a big queue where all the good questions come to be asked and all the good stories come to be told. It is a beautiful storytelling space, actually.
Well, one of the things I think about the workshops, and I'm sure you find it when you do your workshops elsewhere, is the people. You meet so many interesting people, and completely unexpected personalities and the qualities, and it's just a wonderful opportunity of meeting a completely different set of people from time to time.
Yes, absolutely. So Katie Elliott Armitage, thank you so much for taking the wonderful time to speak to us here on the Good Listening To podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to say to leave us with?
No, I don't think so. No, that it's been great fun. Thank you very much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And where can we go and look out for you, either in a fabric context or workshop context? Where can we find out about Katie Elliott Armitage and everything you do on the interweb?
Well, it's on the website, which is Les Sœurs Anglaises. We're just putting it together now for next year. But you're up there, I think, already. So
lesseursanglais.com, and there's also, you're on Instagram and other places like that too with some of your
wonderful... Oh yeah, I am. I don't really do Facebook, but I do Instagram, and I never do Twitter because I don't understand it, or the other things.
And you do a very, is it MailChimp? I'm not trying to plug them, but who do you do your newsletter through?
I do a newsletter from time to time, but you have to get to it through the website, so you just subscribe through there, so that's fine.
It's the French translation of the English sisters. It's lesseursanglais.com.
It's got, yeah, that's the one. So any variation thereof should reach us. I don't think there's anybody else called that.
Wonderful. So listen, thank you so much for taking the time to chat, and I will see you on FaceTime soon to plan for next year, very soon anyway. But also I'll see you on the LOL virus, and there is also a dedicated Facebook group to the Good Listening To podcast now, Katie, as well. Ooh. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Katie Elliott Armitage, the Good Listening To podcast. Goodbye.